Coming off of a game against the Heat where he scored a season-high 23 points, which was also the team high for the game. He looked like he was having fun out there. In the post-LeBron era, the Cavaliers heavily relied on Kevin Love to be the guy to get them out of the abyss of irrelevancy. And as the years went on, all that Kevin Love managed to do was to get the people in the front office to regret their decisions of giving him that lengthy extension and have the fans turn against him in what he admits were some of the worst years of his life. Oh dude, you could do better than that. Okay, let's restart then. The Cavs are rolling in December as they're currently holding the 4th spot in the Eastern Conference, and they're doing this with Kevin Love playing the least minutes in his career this season. 8 guys on the roster currently play more minutes than him, and he's currently on pace to never start a game this season, which would be the first time this has ever happened in his career. Once a top 10 player in the NBA and a beloved figure in a small market team, now he's reviled by many in an even smaller market team. This is a story of how Kevin Love was failed by the NBA. Dominance. That's the one word I would use to describe Kevin Love's early career. Coming out of the state of Oregon, Kevin Love was already considered one of the best players out of that state before he even became a freshman. In his first season, he averaged 20.3 points, 13.8 rebounds, and 3.8 blocks. And already he was making a name for himself despite not being able to win the tournament that year. But during his sophomore year, despite being injured for most of the season, he only played 15 games, and in the playoffs, he averaged 28.6 points, 17.8 rebounds, and they almost won a tournament that year, unfortunately coming short during the championship games. As a consolation prize though, he was named Player of the Year for the state of Oregon, and he was putting up numbers that really got him on the map. His third season though, it was even better, guys. He was averaging numbers like 28 points, 16.1 rebounds, once again named Oregon's Player of the Year, and winning the championship game this time. It seemed like everything was clicking at that point, and his senior season, although not winning the championship, he did average 33.9 points a game, 17 rebounds a game, okay? This guy was just hitting it on all cylinders, and going into college, he went and enrolled in UCLA. He played alongside guys like Russell Westbrook, Darren Collison, and Luc Mbah a Moute. In his first and only season at UCLA, he managed to win Conference Player of the Year. That conference included players like James Harden, Robin and Brook Lopez, Taj Gibson, Jared Bayless. I mean, the list just goes on. And during March Madness, the Bruins managed to go all the way to the Final Four, although they ended up losing to a Memphis team that was led by the eventual #1 pick Derrick Rose. Speaking of which, Kevin Love would end up going 5th in the 2008 draft, with Memphis picking him, and oh wait, he is now traded to the Timberwolves. In exchange, the Timberwolves will give their 3rd pick, OJ Mayo. And looking back, the Timberwolves did the right move, as they managed to dodge a bullet there. I mean, literally. This could have aged poorly for them, as it did in Memphis. But what didn't age well, Kevin Love's play on the court. I mean, it was obvious from his first couple of years in Minnesota that he was going to be a star in this league. I mean, this dude put up points, and he put up rebounds like no one did before. I mean, this guy was such a good shooter from outside, and he would grab you 10 rebounds a game consistently. Over 11 points a game and over 9 rebounds a game in his rookie year. This dude was blazing. And then he averaged 14 points a game and 11 rebounds a game in his second year. Yeah, things were only going up from there. In a season where his draft mate Derrick Rose won the MVP, Kevin Love would put himself in this place that no one's ever been in before, and if you lowered the bar just a teeny bit, only one other player did the things he did that year, okay? 3rd season, he averages over 20 points a game, averages over 15 rebounds a game. He was the league leader in rebounds. Not only that, he shot over 40% from the 3-point line. He was dominating as a stretch forward in ways that previous forwards wish they could, man. He was one of 2 players to average over 10 rebounds and shoot over 40% from deep, and to this day he is the only person to have done this, averaging over 15 rebounds a game. The Timberwolves at this point had themselves a franchise player that was blossoming in this league, and they really needed it since Kevin Garnett really was the last player they had that led them to a playoff appearance, and he was the latest player the Timberwolves had to make it to the All-Star game after being picked by David Stern to replace a injured Yao Ming. In that season, he improved on every facet of his game, and you could see that the NBA also recognized that and gave him the award for most improved player that year. Kevin Love was so good. But the Timberwolves didn't realize how good he was. Because you see, things began to get tense between Love and the front office. During the 2011 offseason, the CBA agreed to introduce a new rule that would allow each NBA team to nominate a player on a rookie contract to receive the designated player contract extension. This contract extension would go on for 5 years instead of the standard 4-year contract that players would be given. And Kevin Love, still in his rookie contract, made it clear that he wanted to be signed on that 5-year designated player contract extension. The Timberwolves front office though, they had different plans, as they didn't want to give him that extension, and quite honestly, it seemed like they didn't think much of Kevin Love. In fact, it got so bad that David Kahn, the team GM at the time, went into the locker room and just shoved the contract sheet offer in Kevin Love's face. And they would eventually settle on a 4-year contract that would give Love the player option to opt out and become a free agent after his 3rd year. Many argue that one of the main reasons the Timberwolves didn't want to sign him to that lengthy extension was because of the history of injuries that were already beginning to pile up in Kevin Love's young career. And this is something that, combined with the fact that they never made the playoffs during those 3 years, made it hard on the front office to trust a guy like Kevin Love in the long term. And Kevin Love, during the 2011-2012 shortened season, had played 55 games of the 66 regular season games, averaged 26 points a game, 13 rebounds a game, and made his 2nd straight All-Star game. And just as things were looking up, the following season was a dud. It was really a bad season. He fractured 2 bones in his hand, he had to have surgery on it, and he missed most of the season, only having played 18 games. But fortunately for him, the following season he would rebound, get an All-Star nod for the 3rd time in his career. He would average his career high 26.1 points a game. He averaged over 12 rebounds as well, just dominating like he used to. But that was only enough for the team to win 40 of their 82 games, making it so that they couldn't even play in the playoffs that year. Having a record of 40 and 42 in the Eastern Conference would have put your team at the 5th spot during that season. And Kevin Love at this point was starting to get tired of missing the playoffs year after year after year. And with this latest season being his best shot at making it, he was just ready to pull the trigger. In a prior interview done with Adrian Wojnarowski when he worked at Yahoo Sports in 2013, he admitted that even the owner of the Timberwolves didn't have much faith in Kevin Love at that time. And you could tell that Kevin, he felt slighted by some of the comments he made. He lamented that he didn't feel like he had much support from the franchise. And he even elaborated that Glenn Taylor himself said that he didn't think Kevin Love was a star because he didn't lead them to the playoffs. And so with all that in mind, you could see how a disgruntled Kevin Love forced his way out of the Timberwolves. And for once, the player that left the team wasn't vilified by its fans. I remember personally being in Minneapolis when the news of the trade broke, and the talk of the town was nothing but positive. People had nothing but good things to say about Kevin Love, and it really did give me an impression that the Timberwolves fan base and even the Vikings fan base in Minnesota, they're some of the nicest people I've met, and I really do hope that one day, whether it be the Timberwolves or the Vikings or even the Twins and the Wild, one of those teams gives this fan base a championship because they desperately need it. I think it will just make things so much better over there. Okay, but now we have to talk about Kevin Love. That's what the video is about, right? Kevin Love is now a Cleveland Cavalier. LeBron, Kyrie, and Kevin Love. Before we get into those years in Cleveland though, we have to look back and see some of the things the owner of the Timberwolves had to say, because He went on to say more things that disparaged Kevin Love in a way, but wasn't meant to really insult him. Although many would tell you that Glenn Taylor is the sole reason why the Timberwolves keep losing year after year after year, he may have been onto something when he said, and I quote, "I question Kevin if this is going to be the best deal for him because I think he's going to be the third player on the team. I don't think he's going to get a lot of credit if they do really well. I think he'll get the blame if they don't do well. He's going to have to learn to handle that." And if you think that was the extent of what he said, think again, because he goes on to say, and I quote, "I think he's around a couple of guys that are awful good. Now, I'm not saying that Kevin's not good, but I think where maybe he got away with some stuff, not playing defense on our team, I'm not sure how that's going to work in Cleveland. So I would guess they're going to ask him to play more defense, and he's foul prone." And this wasn't some out of this world Nostradamus type prediction. No, this was something that was commonly said by many people because he was going to be put in the same position as a Chris Bosh, being the third wheel of this juggernaut Miami team where the ball would mostly go on LeBron James and Dwayne Wade's hands. But for Kevin Love, it wasn't about the numbers, it was simply about the wins. He wanted to be in the playoffs for the first time. He wanted to get into a position where he could be a contributing player in the winning team. He wanted that championship more than ever now. Seeing guys in his draft class like Derrick Rose make it to the conference finals and guys like Russell Westbrook making it to the finals, he wanted some of that action. And you can't blame him for wanting to do what he did. But it seemed like life had other plans for him because in his first playoff appearance, in his first opening series against the Celtics, tragedy struck.
Crowder 3 for 3. Olynyk and Love fighting for it, and this is going to be cool. Love hurt? Did Love hurt himself?
Yes, he did.
His shoulder popped out.
Yeah, he ran right.
The Cavaliers would eventually end up making the 2015 NBA Finals, but in the first opening game, Kyrie Irving would go down with an injury, and LeBron James would have to carry much of the load like he did in 2007 to try to win a championship. He did well, managing to get a 2-1 lead during the series, but the Warriors routed them in the next 3 games to get the championship. The next season was a season of redemption, a season in which LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love all vowed to try to get themselves back in the finals. One notable change the Cavaliers made was firing head coach David Blatt and getting Tyronn Lue to coach the team. Many people at that time thought the LeBron-led Cavs would have beaten the Golden State Warriors had it not been for the injuries of Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving. And 2016 was the year to try to prove that right. And once again, for the second straight time, the Cleveland Cavaliers would face the reigning champs, Golden State Warriors in the NBA Finals. It will be a finals full of historical feats. It will be a finals full of storylines, and one of them was very eerie because after a horrible Game 5 in which the Cavaliers managed to pull off the win, Kevin Love's name was being dragged in the mud. Many people saying if the Cleveland Cavaliers were to lose the series, a big part of the blame would have to go on Kevin Love. Part of the problem wasn't just that he wasn't putting up the numbers that we're used to seeing out of Kevin Love, but the Warriors, like many teams, were able to take advantage of the Kevin Love, Kyrie Irving pick and roll defense. It just reinforced this reputation he has as a bad defender, and it got many people to wonder, was he going to get traded at that point? Game 6 followed suit, and after fouling twice within the first 2 minutes, he had to get out of the game right away, and he was in foul trouble the whole game. He only played 11 minutes, didn't do much in that game, and once again, he just wasn't a factor. Although fortunately for the Cavaliers, they managed to win Game 6, and with Game 7 on the way, it was up to Kevin Love to silence the doubters, and it was up to the Cavaliers to make history and be the first team to ever come back down 3-1 in the final series. It was hands down one of the best finals games I've ever seen in my life. It went down to the wire, and Kevin Love, who had a lot of bad moments in the series, came up big with 9 points, 14 rebounds, only fouling twice this time, with the highest plus minus of the team. After Kyrie Irving hit that dagger three that everyone remembers to take the lead, Kevin Love did something that most people forget and really made sure that the lead was kept with this defensive play on Curry.
Shut off nicely, found to Green, 7 to shoot.
Curry fakes the three, steps back, crossover.
It was over. LeBron James finally winning a championship for his hometown, his third title of his career. Kyrie Irving being an instrumental part with that dagger three-pointer. And Kevin Love not being attributed as much credit as those two. Yes, those words coming from Glenn Taylor all ended up coming true within a span of 2 years. And it would get worse. Kevin Durant made the most earth-shattering move to join the Warriors in the offseason, and it was a formality at this point that the Warriors were going to win the title that year. Kevin Love would play better that season, earning his first All-Star bout since joining the Cavaliers, and they would also make it to the finals once again to face the Golden State Warriors. But with Kevin Durant now being the lead player, it was virtually impossible for them to even win that series. And so, yeah, it was a genuine sweep, 4-1. The Warriors won the whole thing. Kevin Durant, first championship, great moment for him. But the news of the offseason was not about Kevin Durant or Kevin Love, but more so about Kyrie Irving and LeBron James. Yeah, there seems to have been tension between those two, and it didn't seem like there was going to be a reconciliation at any point. And so Kyrie Irving ends up going to the Celtics, with a trade being made to acquire guard Isaiah Thomas. Thomas himself was dealing with a hip injury that hindered him from performing at his best during the conference finals, and all of this would culminate in a season that was the beginning of the end for the Cleveland Cavaliers being a championship team, and quite frankly would be the beginning of Kevin Love's demise in the Cleveland Cavaliers.
You know, fellas, Kevin Love, they said they had a team meeting and that he was the brunt of everybody's frustration, that they were upset that he left the game and he didn't come back the next day.
Trading Kevin Love is not out of the question. But
we begin today with a report by Adrian Wojnarowski that the spiraling Cleveland Cavaliers have landed on Kevin Love as the blame for everything that's going wrong. The Kevin Love stuff centers on some teammates' doubt that Love was really sick the other day when he left the arena at halftime of the game against Oklahoma City.
A new report from Cleveland.com says it was Dwayne Wade who instigated the issue, challenging head coach Ty Lue to find out where Love had been. For weeks, the allegations were that Isaiah Thomas led the charge against Love.
It was clear at this point that the Cleveland Cavaliers needed to do a major shakeup during the midseason to get themselves to be in the finals once again, and they did just that by trading away players like Isaiah Thomas and Dwayne Wade, and things seemed to be getting better for them and for Kevin Love as well. But unfortunately, nothing came of the season as the Cavaliers ended up getting swept in the NBA Finals, looking like a shell of their former selves in 2016 and even in 2017 when they had Kyrie Irving. It really did seem like it was going to be the end of an illustrious run for the Cleveland Cavaliers as LeBron James headed out to LA to try to finish his career over there. And Kevin Love was now in a situation that he was very familiar with. A rebuilding team, a team that was once again having to rely on him to push this team to a playoff contention. And that trust in him was shown when they decided to give him a 4-year extension worth $120 million. He was about to make the most money ever in his career. On the surface, that may look like a great thing for him, but that only meant that there would be more pressure put on him, more so than there was in Minnesota. And 2018 was the year that Kevin Love revealed to us how he was feeling mentally and how he was dealing with anxiety and depression like he's never dealt with in his life. And so now we're going to have to rewind a little bit and go back to 2017, November, where Kevin Love revealed to us that he had his first ever panic attack. This moment would prove to be a major turning point in his life, as Kevin Love before that moment had a perception of mental health that, like many others, was quite distanced. He was raised, like many men were before him, and still are to this day, to bottle up their emotions, to not show any signs of weakness, and to live life figuring things out on your own without asking anyone else for help. He didn't think he needed help. When asked about whether or not it would be a great idea for NBA players to go seek therapy, he scoffed at the idea. He even laughed it off, saying that there was no point in him paying money to talk about things with someone else. And his article that he wrote on the Players Tribune went on to be a very impactful one. It was one of those moments that I can remember that really destigmatized the conversation around mental health and mental well-being, not just in the NBA world, but just in the world in general. Part of what caused him to have a panic attack was the pressure that was put on him to perform each day and night and to come out there and play his best basketball. And he was struggling to do so in 2017 when it all happened. In the latter end of 2018, the post-LeBron era would begin once again in Cleveland, but he only ended up playing 22 games during that season. He had injuries to his toe, he had injuries to his back, his shoulder, and thus the rebuilding process in Cleveland would begin once again. The first major rookie that the Cavaliers picked in 5th in the 2018 draft, Colin Sexton, well, he looked promising. Another season goes on. In 2019, they have the 8th pick. They pick a player by the name of Darius Garland with it. They also picked up a guy in Dylan Windler late in the first round. Look, by no means were the Cleveland Cavaliers a good team, but they were getting themselves acclimated with players like Cedi Osman from the championship era coming in and contributing with good minutes. Oh, and this time Kevin Love actually played more than 50 games this season. And although he did play his best stretch of basketball since LeBron left the Cavaliers, frustrations began to mount and Kevin Love was finding himself in a familiar spot.
This morning, during the first half, there were moments of a bit of frustration. What was going on that we were getting so frustrated over?
I think you're talking about the play when Chris Paul was on. Yeah, I felt, we were making a play call and, I wanted to, where was it? We were end of the second half. We were in the bonus and Chris Paul was on me, so I felt, swing it to me and try and throw it into the post, see if they double team and get a good shot out of that. But that's not what we did, and I was frustrated. I was frustrated and let my emotions get the best of me. I wasn't acting like a 31-year-old. I was acting like a 13-year-old.
According to the story, Altman threatened to fine Love at the end of last season, and Love said, quote, "Go ahead, I have plenty of money."
With all this going on within the season, Kevin Love had to respond and promptly assure his fans that not only was a lot of the claims being said from the media not true, but that he loved his teammates and that he loved being in Cleveland. And of course, we all know about what happened in 2020. The huge pandemic happened and the world had to slow down for a while. No activities outside. A lot of people would have to remain at home doing things that they're not so used to doing. And Kevin Love was one of those people that struggled through it, and he would go on to write an article on the Players Tribune talking about everything that he's been through and empathizing with everybody else that have had hard times during this stretch. Up to this point, the Cavaliers were still trying to rebuild, and they drafted Isaac Okoro in 2020, and they also tried their hands at trading a few players when the James Harden trade came through during the 2020-2021 season. And they traded away players to get Jarrett Allen from the Brooklyn Nets. Now, the Cavaliers did have Andre Drummond also on the lineup, and he was subsequently bought out and he went his way to LA to play with the Lakers. But things kept getting worse for Kevin Love.
Here's this play I was talking about. Just good hustle. What is Kevin Love doing? I think he's just batting it.
And now it was more blatant than ever. Not only the lack of effort that Kevin Love gave on the court at times, but also the outrage that was thrown against him. A lot of people had a huge problem with Kevin Love and how he was dealing with the Cavaliers and how he was handling himself on the court. It was really a tough situation to look at, and many people were not only suspecting but also rooting for Kevin Love to be traded at any point during the 2021 season. And now the Cleveland Cavaliers won the 3rd pick in the lottery for the NBA draft in 2021, and they picked a player in Evan Mobley that quite honestly looks like a generational talent. There were already talks of the potential, the huge potential on the defensive end, with Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley leading the front court of this team. And the talks of Kevin Love potentially getting traded or potentially buying out of his contract were once again ramping up, as Lauri Markkanen was picked up by the Cavaliers via a trade that would see Larry Nance Jr. go to Portland, that would see the Chicago Bulls getting Derrick Jones Jr. and 2 protected draft picks from the Trailblazers and the Nuggets. I remember the first video I made on this channel that took off was talking about how the Portland Trailblazers won the Lauri Markkanen trade by getting Larry Nance Jr. And if we look at the standings, and if we look at the record, and if we look at the defensive play of both teams, I would say that that take I had in September aged quite poorly. The Portland Trailblazers, even with Nance Jr. being in the team, have the 27th worst defensive rating, and the Cavaliers, as of the making of this video, have the 2nd best defensive rating, only behind the Warriors. But not only that, even the offense got better for the Cavaliers, and the Trailblazers offense this year is not nearly as effective as it was last year. Look, the Portland Trailblazers were 2nd in offensive rating during last season, and the Cavaliers were 28th in offensive rating. Now, looking into this season, the Cavaliers are 16th in offensive rating and the Trailblazers trailing at 18th. And part of what makes this offense, so much better than it was last year is the guard play of Darius Garland, Sexton, and Ricky Rubio, who they picked up during the offseason. Evan Mobley has been sensational on offense and on defense, and it's part of the reason why the Cavaliers are doing so well, being the 4th seed in the East at the moment. And this incredible defensive play is not just coming from the free 7-foot frontcourt players that the Cavaliers have in our lineup. No. It also comes from guards like Isaac Okoro, who are oftentimes tasked with guarding the opponent's best guard. And even with Sexton being out for the remainder of the season, you still have a lineup in Darius Garland, Isaac Okoro, Markkanen, Mobley, and Jared Allen that can go up against any team in the league and make it an interesting game. And where Kevin Love fits in all this, unfortunately for him, he's now relegated to the bench, playing the least minutes in his career. He did have one game where he scored 23 points like I mentioned earlier, but those games don't come very often, and with Kevin Love not wanting to buy out of his contract, it's going to be tough for him to get any meaningful minutes in the next 2 years. The only way Kevin Love can revitalize his career at this point is if he were to go to another team, a contending team, and contribute from day one. But based on how his career has gone so far, not much will change regardless of how well he plays. If he does well in a contending team, the credit will most likely go to players above him, and if he does horribly, the blame will go mostly on him. With him being the face of mental health in the NBA, that comes with him being the target of a vocal minority that seeks to discredit anything and everything he does on the court and disparage him by using his vulnerabilities against him. All of this is why I say the NBA has failed him. And when I say the NBA as a whole, I don't just mean the league, the players, the coach. I also mean the media, I also mean the NBA fans, and everybody else that interacts with the NBA world on social media. And sure, Kevin Love is at fault for some of the things that have happened in his career. But is he at fault for going through 6 years of being mismanaged by a horrible GM with an owner that has no belief in you as a star? Is he at fault for the media and the fans to always remind him that he's the third wheel of the LeBron-led Cavs? Is he at fault for being emotional during a team meeting when you have players actively questioning his illness? Is he at fault for having the extensive injury history he's had? Is he at fault for feeling depressed when he gets up in the morning only for him to have fans tell him to just get over it and be grateful that you're getting paid $30 million a year? Is he at fault for struggling with the pressures that come with being an NBA player on a day-to-day basis?